Actually, what happened?
You lost a fight.
I don't remember.
Trust me. You lost.
Baylan's skull.
So you do remember. That's good.
Why?
It means you still have a chance.
Chance.
To live.
Tell me what's going on.
I'm here to finish your training.
It's a little late for that.
One is never too old to learn, Snips.
Oh, greetings once again, Bucketheads. Mavar Tigar. Welcome to our 216th Wildly Walking Between Worlds episodes of Mandovision. Nargai Tom, and thank you so much for checking out this small, independent Star Wars podcast. We are so glad you're here. Remember, the best way to reach out to us is, of course, on social media, on X/Twitter, whatever they call it now, and on Instagram. Find us at Mando_Vision. You can email the show, mandovisiontom@gmail.com. Make sure to like, subscribe, follow, and share the show with all the Mandalorians in your covert. Well, welcome aboard, everybody. We're so glad you're back. I'm a little late with the episode, but it's okay. We're still going to be on Wednesday. It's coming out today, just later than expected. Had some travel going on. Just got back into town. Watched the episode last night. Watched it again today on the plane ride home. And like all of you, I have my thoughts. I have my feelings. And they're generally positive, by and large, for this episode. I did really enjoy a lot of the things they did in this episode. There was a few elements to it that I found a little distracting, a little... We'll talk about them. Don't worry. There's going to be time to pick the nits, and talk about all the other goodies that we get into in this episode, because it is a lot in this episode. Another long 50-ish minute episode of the show. I think if you don't count the credits, it clocks in a little bit less than like 48 minutes, I think. But still, a lot going on in the episode itself. There's a lot to sort of digest, sort of process. And again, I still have to wonder after this episode, what are the people who've never seen Clone Wars and Rebels thinking when they watch this episode? Do they sort of have a better understanding of the Anakin and Ahsoka relationship now, or are they just sort of in the dark about all of it because it wasn't in the movies that they saw, so they don't understand any of it? I've heard both sides of I guess I've heard from both camps on that, of people who didn't watch Clone Wars or Rebels. They seem to be enjoying the show just fine, which is good. I think that will maintain. But I will be curious if this episode has those people in my life who get to interact with me on a regular basis. If next time I see them, if they will be just hammering me with questions about more of their relationship and things like that. So, how are the newbies in your life handling the series so far? let me know. I'm very, very curious how it's all going. But by and large, whether they're plugged in with Clone Wars and Rebels or not, I think by and large this show has been massively successful. People seem to be talking about it in very much positive light, and that's a good thing. And you know, again, there's always going to be those nits to pick. We're always going to sort of have our own ideas about things and how we would have maybe like to have seen things handled, but that is what it is, and we'll get into those things on the podcast here. But yeah, by and large, I think this show has been excellent thus far, and I'm really excited to talk about this episode because there's just a lot of it to kind of pull back, and we get some answers to some of the questions that I posed, some of the things I was like a little concerned about that are brought up in earlier episodes in the season. Some of those things get addressed in this episode, and so we'll go back and we'll kind of like talk about those talking points that I had and look at how we have to recontextualize all that stuff because I think this episode gave us some more backstory stuff that we really needed to fill in the gaps. You know, like what's been going on with Ahsoka since the last time we saw her at the end of Rebels. And again, we pointed it out after the first episode that when they recreated that sequence, where Ahsoka goes and picks up Sabine Wren and they're looking at the mural and all that stuff, we mentioned some of the differences between what was in the end of Rebels and what was in that first episode of Ahsoka. And I think now we get a bit of a explanation as to why it's a little bit different. And we'll talk about all those things. So let's go ahead and get everything out of the way, all of our particulars that we need to handle. This is Ahsoka, Season 1, Part 5, Shadow Warrior. Original air date, September 12th, 2023. Written and directed by Dave Filoni. Our primary cast for this week's episode, Rosario Dawson, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, Evan Whitten, Genevieve O'Reilly, Paul Sun-Hung Lee, Ariana Greenblatt, David Tennant, and of course, the guest star extraordinaire who elevates this episode to another level, Hayden Christensen, back as Anakin Skywalker, having a chat, a confrontation, a duel with his former Padawan, his former apprentice, Ahsoka Tano. So our plot this week, Ahsoka confronts her past while Hera and her allies undertake a rescue mission. All right, let's go ahead and dive into it. There's a lot to get to, folks, and I'm hoping you're as excited to get into it as I am. So it's time. Strap on your buckets. Let's go.
Mom, listen.
I am.
No, listen to the waves.
General?
Okay. What are we listening for?
Don't you hear it?
The waves crashing?
No. The lightsabers.
Carson, get your squadron airborne. I need you out over the ocean, low altitude, full sweep.
We already did that.
Well, we're doing it again. Liang, you're with me in the Ghost.
Right away.
Jason, good work. Chopper, stay with him.
What am I missing? What just happened?
Jason has abilities. His father, Kanan Jarrus, was a Jedi.
Yeah, you're right. We let that one run along, but I have to be perfectly honest with everybody. That might have been one of my favorite moments of this particular episode of the series. Moment of the I should say of the series. That's a bit of a bold statement, but of this episode, and this is an episode full of like really, really cool moments, kind of being brought to life, and that one just sort of hit for me, like in a really big bad way. I sometimes think I underestimate my love for Star Wars Rebels, And then you drop Kanan Jarrus's name, and I get like all emotional and choked up about it. I was like, oh my God, it's so sad that boy doesn't have his father. Which is, again, a very Star Wars trope. But I thought it was just a really well-executed scene, handled masterfully by Dave Filoni. And it really allows Jason Syndulla a chance to kind of shine for a moment. He's sort of been gradually picking up a little bit more momentum as this series has played out. And for him to get a cool moment like that, I think really opens the door for the character moving forward. Of course, we have to ask ourselves when it comes to Jason Syndulla, the elephant in the room, of course, is, well, does Kylo Ren kill him at Luke Skywalker's academy? Does Ben Solo chop him in little bitty pieces when he decides to destroy Luke's academy? We're not going to go down that road. Let's not go down that particular path today. We can play Star Wars speculation theater another time. But we hit that moment for the bump because I just thought it was awesome, and I wanted to make sure it got included in this week's episode because to me it hits really hard. I love it. Great scene, great moment. The episode basically picks up where we left off last episode, right? Everything's in peril. Everything's up in, no one knows what's happening. Hera's on the ground looking to find out what happened to Sabine and Ahsoka when she finds Huang lamenting their disappearance by holding Sabine's Mandalorian helmet and talking about how they were better when they stick together, but why would they ever listen to Huang? Again, a great moment for David Tennant in this, as he sort of underlines the fact that that Huang himself is sort of the heart and soul of the show in a sense, as he sort of articulates all these feelings that we as an audience have. He's the one who sort of is our voice on a lot of these things, which I think is very, very interesting. Huang also has a couple other really great moments in this episode as well, particularly when he's talking to Hera about Ahsoka's, master and what he was like, and just uses the word intense. I think intense is almost an understatement for Anakin Skywalker. But and again, it's another scene too where we sort of have to wonder, like, did Ahsoka tell Huang about Anakin Skywalker and like where it all goes, or is it still like the big galactic secret that we believe it to be? I'm very curious if Ahsoka confided in Huang about this, because intense is a very good choice of words, but sometimes I think it may be too small of a word. And then again, referring to when he's talking to Hera about why people like her, because she cares and people know that. So Huang has a lot of really great stuff in this episode. I just want to make sure I highlighted that. Again, we talked about the Hera and Jason with the lightsabers and the waves. Absolutely loved it. Great to see more of Carson Teva in the show. Always good to check in with him. The sort of bummer of this episode is, and we're going to get to the juicy meat of the episode soon, but one of the things I'm sort of bumping up against, and it's not because I think they're doing it wrong or any of those things. It's just one of these elements that, like, I know why they're doing it. It just frustrates me. I can't handle, and again, we all know it's coming, but the ineptitude of the New Republic, it's just so ridiculous to me. Their interference in this particular episode, arriving at Cephas way late in the game, so they can attempt to bring back Ahsoka and Hera because Hera's gonna be facing charges of insubordination, and they use like that clumsy term, the permanent. What do they say? Permanent suspension of her rank. Isn't that just called being revoked, or like court-martial or something like that? I suppose there's a better. I would imagine there's a better term for it than permanently revoked or permanently suspended. Now I'm confusing myself which words they actually use, but I just thought it was clunky. But yeah, it's annoying me how blind the New Republic is to things, and that's not too dissimilar from a lot of stuff in. Whether it's the old expanded universe stuff or the new canon that we're being introduced to via the Mandalorian, or even the novels that are coming out prior that are taking place prior to The Force Awakens. We sort of see that the New Republic is the same as the Old Republic. It's full of corrupt self-involved bureaucrats. And was the galaxy really better off with the death of the Empire? I mean, of course it was. Tyranny's bad, but bureaucratic red tape is not fun for anybody, anyways. So, at a certain point, I have to wonder, like, what will Hera push back? She's having these chats with Mon Mothma, right? But she hasn't really pushed back. And at what point does Hera begin to question why is she fighting for this new republic? Why is she still actively engaged in this? She sees the levels of bureaucracy. Does she still believe? Does someone like Leia Organa keep her help her keep the hope alive that this will be a better government than the one before it? At what point does Hera say, screw this, I got a ship, I'm gonna go help my friends, I'm out of here? Well, that ship may literally have sailed away in this episode. So if Hera's going to be involved in the rest of the season, it may not be till the very, very end, when she'll either rally the New Republic forces or she's going to have to go rogue once again. But that is a very Star Wars method, right? Going rogue. We love it when our heroes go rogue. And so they spend a lot of time, Hera, Huang, Carson Teva, looking for Sabine, looking for Ahsoka, trying to figure out what the heck's been going on Cephas. And that's sort of like something I guess I could have done a little bit less of. Again, the moment with Jason and Hera is great, but there's so much going on with Ahsoka and Anakin in the world between worlds that I sort of wish we had spent a little bit more time in there. But again, I know they have to tell the story in a certain way. I just had it was such a wonderful opportunity for Anakin and Ahsoka as characters to have like a really much needed sort of dialogue. But of course, it's also Star Wars too, so they're never going to give you everything you want in those conversations. There's a lot of cryptic talk. There's a lot of mysticism involved. There's no direct answers. No one's really straightforward about anything. But it's a much needed conversation because it illuminates some of the things that I've wondered about with Ahsoka since this series started. Now, remember, we've pointed out, and I'm sure I'm not the only person doing it. There's a big chunk of time for Ahsoka where we don't really know where her head has been. We're getting clues to what's been going on with her since Rebels, but her appearance in the first episode, her sort of being this locking in on Jedi stoicism, sort of being more traditional in Jedi senses, not being as open with her emotions as we've seen her in the past, and we talked about it before too. Her appearance is different in that first episode of Ahsoka when she picks up Sabine and they go on the search for Ezra, right? When we see her in Rebels, she's wearing all white. In the first episode in this season, when they recreate the scene, she's wearing gray. And now we start to get a little bit more idea of what's going on here, the sort of inner turmoil that Ahsoka has, the inner conflict that she's going through. And a lot of it stems from her notion of her perception of her legacy, and believing that because she is the apprentice of Anakin Skywalker, that Darth Vader, the potential to be a Darth Vader level character, is within her too. And so this episode is mostly about confronting that, and trying to show that the legacy that she has is more than just Anakin Skywalker. It's everyone who came before Anakin Skywalker. We're talking about the entire line, right? That, Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon, Dooku, Yoda, it goes back. There's a big, rich history. And again, if you examine that line, we mentioned Dooku, another guy who went to the bad side. So in one sense, this is about Ahsoka really just kind of confronting what's inside of her, if she has the capacity to be a Darth Vader, right? And it's through the conversation, through the interactions, with Anakin Skywalker, and two particularly key moments are provided by two flashbacks, courtesy of being in the world between worlds. And the first one was the one that really kind of took my breath away at first, because I was like, whoa, wait a second here. And that is going back to the beginning of the Clone Wars, to a young Ahsoka, played by Ariana Greenblatt, and wonderfully portrayed by her as well. I really loved the scenes between Ariana Greenblatt and Hayden Christensen. I thought they had like a legit chemistry here. I loved seeing young Ahsoka from the beginning of the Clone Wars. It looks like they're on the Battle of Ryloth. I could be mistaken. I'm going to assume it's the Battle of Ryloth because I did see Twi'leks. But again, they could have just been freedom fighters on another planet. I've also seen it rumored that it might have been the Battle of Teth, but I'm going with Ryloth on this just because the presence of Twi'leks would seem to indicate otherwise. But But what also was really cool, and again, this is for us deep cutters, right, who have that Clone Wars knowledge. Seeing Hayden Christensen don the costume, the outfit, the uniform of Clone Wars era Anakin Skywalker, the one that we saw in the animated series for so long. Seeing that brought to life on Hayden Christensen. It was very, very cool. And again, Ariana Greenblatt, I think, was a wonderful embodiment of the young Ahsoka Tano, especially because we're at that early battle in the Clone Wars when it's like her first time out in the battlefield, and she's asking all these questions. Now it's because we're in the world between worlds. Ahsoka can have these questions and look at things from a different perspective. But we have to remember Ahsoka too. She was more than willing to be out there in the midst of the war, in the Clone Wars movie. In the first episodes of the animated series, she wasn't shy about getting involved in the action. She wanted to be in part of the action. So I think we have the older Ahsoka looking at things and questioning, like, why was this the way it had to be? Why did I have to learn to be a soldier? And Anakin explains that the Jedi have to adapt to the times. That the Jedi, at the time when Anakin was inducted, they were keepers of the peace. But then the Clone Wars happened, and they had to become soldiers of the Republic. And so he had to train Ahsoka to be a soldier because that was the only way she was going to survive. And it's a really interesting conversation. It causes Ahsoka to ask a lot of questions that I think we all wondered about. And from a pullback perspective as an audience, I mean, the visual of the young Ahsoka, again portrayed by Ariana Greenblatt, it's striking in the sense that, like, we're watching. And this podcast, as you know, is very critical of the Jedi Order. But we're literally watching them put a child into warfare. I mean, that is insanity, right? Like, no compunction at all from the Jedi Order about putting children in the middle of a war because, well, they're Jedi children, right? So that means it's okay. It's insane when you think about it in those terms. I mean, again, it's one thing when you're watching the animated series, but seeing a real life person, a child actor portraying a child soldier, that's got some elements to it that are, like, really dark in a lot of wild ways. And again, if you think the Jedi were ever going to come out of the Clone Wars in one piece, you were sorely mistaken, because they were clearly doomed to fall. But just these actions alone, these Jedi Knights taking these young children Padawans into battle with them, insanity. But it's a pivotal moment for Ahsoka because it's the beginning of her journey. And so we get to the second flashback moment, which is at the end of her journey, and one that Anakin recognizes, or does not, or fails to recognize because he wasn't there for it, which is seeing Ahsoka in battle in the Siege of Mandalore, cutting down Darth Maul's Mandalorian forces. It's awesome to see that happen. We get a Captain Rex cameo, Tamora Morrison with a cameo appearance in this. No face, just the vocals, but still a nice touch. And seeing these moments of the Clone Wars brought to life from animation to live action, really stellar stuff. But it's all about Ahsoka sort of exploring her journey, and wondering if she can be a Jedi for peace now. She was raised in the war. Can she not be a soldier any longer? Can she be a better master than she was the first time around to Sabine? And you also have to look at it in the sense of Anakin, right? Because Anakin failed many people when he fell, right? He failed the Jedi Order. He failed those younglings that he slaughtered in the temple. He failed everyone who was with him at that moment. But Ahsoka, because she wasn't there for that, in the sense, again, in one sense, he definitely fails her. But Anakin, as a master, as a teacher to Ahsoka Tano, he gave her all the tools that she needed to come out of the Clone Wars alive and not be dead and not get killed. And it's a pretty impressive moment for her to have to kind of ponder these things and to wrestle with it as she, again, looks for a better understanding of her legacy and what it means to be the student of Anakin Skywalker. And if, as he says, everything that he is in her, but she's still herself. She still makes her choices. She still knows the path that she's on. And that's ultimately where we go when they have another confrontation at the end where it seems like she doesn't want to fight. She's making the wrong choices. She's choosing death over life in the sense, because again, the world between worlds scene is strange. I cannot lie. Is Ahsoka dying, in reality, as she's having this conversation with Anakin in the world between worlds, or is she in the world between worlds and not yet in the body of water on Cephas? There's a lot of questions. There's a lot of mysticism stuff. You just kind of go with a lot of it. I would be curious to hear everyone's reactions because, I mean, again, she could be in the water for, just minutes, really, and this whole thing could be happening in the world between worlds or in her mind very, very quickly. So I'm sort of interested in your thoughts on that. But it does seem like Hera and everybody are searching for quite some time. So I'd like to think that she wasn't underwater there that entire time, because that would be just silly, wouldn't it? So them having that moment, Anakin and Ahsoka having that conversation. There's one part of it I do want to play for you guys when it turns and gets a little dark. And again, this is Ahsoka basically confronting herself and the things that are inside of her. I think that's sort of what we have to remember here. It's like, is Anakin's darkness part of her? Because she fears that it is. So she must confront that fear. And, as she confronts the fear, she will have to see, is she going to make the same choices that Anakin made to fall to the dark side? So I want to play a clip from that just prior to their second duel. Here we go. All right, so here we go. It's the whole little thing here where he even talks about the whole thing with legacy. Let's do it.
Ahsoka, within you will be everything I am. All the knowledge I possess. Just as I inherited knowledge from my master, and he from his. We're part of a legacy.
But my part of that legacy is one of death and war.
But you're more than that. Because I'm more than that.
You are more, Anakin. But more powerful and dangerous than anyone realized.
Is that what this is about?
If I am everything you are,
You've learned nothing.
don't say that.
Back to the beginning. I gave you a choice. Live. Or die.
And so that's another great moment when he fires up that lightsaber again. But this time, it's the red blade of Vader. Because again, Anakin's duality is a key part of him now, even in the world between worlds. And this is, and we saw it when in the first flashback on what we believe to be Ryloth. Anakin charging into battle, and then as like the lighting changes around him, we see the shape of Vader and the red blade. And that's a visual image they use quite a bit in this episode, the shifting back and forth from Anakin to Vader. But this time, when the blade comes on, it is the red blade of Vader, and that's we get sort of dark Anakin from here on out with the red eyes of the Sith, and we see that moment come for Ahsoka as she taps into the darkness that's inside of her as well. We saw a flash of that last week when she threw Shin Hati against the rock, an emotional lashing out right there. So we know that darkness is in Ahsoka, but it's all about the choices that she makes, and that's what it comes down to, because as that red Sith eye forms in Ahsoka, she makes the choice not to kill Anakin in that moment, and thus sort of passing her Jedi trials in a sense. And I think it's a really, really powerful, well-executed scene once again. And it also has a connection in my mind to Empire Strikes Back when Luke's in the cave on Dagobah, when he doesn't make the right choice, when he lashes out with his emotions, with his anger, and kills Vader, but only to find his own face beneath the mask. It's like that, but different. And in a sense, it feels like there feels like some Star Wars piling on to Luke Skywalker and sort of tarnishing his legacy. But that's again, that is for a different episode of the podcast. But let's stay focused on Ahsoka, and this is a pivotal moment for her because now she's been tested, and she's come out the other side knowing and feeling more connected to the light than she had prior to this. She had to confront her darkness and the fear within her, and she passed the test. So this is also when, in reality, Hera, with the help of Chopper and Jason, and the X-wing pilots like Carson Teva, they find Ahsoka's body in the water, and as she sort of completes this trial with Anakin in the World Between Worlds, and they're able to rescue her. And as she comes back to a day later after her ordeal, she is more connected to the light before, and you see it in Rosario's performance that she now looks lighter on her feet, not burdened by a fear of her legacy, fear of her role, her place in the galaxy, in a sense. So she's more connected down to the light, and we see that reflected with her costume change, because as she goes from Ahsoka the Gray to Ahsoka the White, and another Lord of the Rings reference here that we can't seem to shake, now we get an Ahsoka that is more in line with, I think, what we all were sort of expecting to see from the character. It's first noticed with her interaction with Jason, but particularly with what happens at the end of the episode. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. But let's kind of... Yeah, I think I hit everything I wanted to talk about with the duels. Yeah, I did it. For once, I hit all my talking points without having to loop back around again. So, hey, all right. So now it's time for us to figure out exactly what happened to Sabine. Ahsoka is able to pick up an echo off of the map sphere that's been cut in half by Baylan Skoll. Not only does she figure out that she's gone with them, but as she ponders these things, she begins to come up with a way to track them down. And it's big surprise. We predicted it. I'm sure I wasn't the only one. The Purrgil will be the way to the other galaxy where Ezra and Thrawn dwell, and where Sabine may be headed to right now. And again, this lighter version of Ahsoka, now more connected to the light side of the Force, and more, again, I think more her old self, draped in white, goes out on her spaceship and communes with like the mother of all Purrgil, and convinces her that riding Pinocchio style, or Jonah style, I suppose, is the way to go to get them to the other galaxy. So Huang parks the ship in the mouth of the Purrgil, and they're going to go off together to another galaxy in the Star Wars universe now, right? And this is also when the New Republic is boldly interfering with the plan. I do want to mention Carson Teva's attempts to stall are rebuffed, and it isn't until he decides to tell the truth that buys them enough time that General Syndulla's plan can kind of work, and they have the time allotted so that Ahsoka can persuade the Purrgil to give them let them hitchhike to another galaxy with them. But it ends on a big bad note with, well, I shouldn't say big bad, but a big note, a cool moment with us seeing again for the first time in non-animation, even though they're computer animated, the Purrgil taking off using their abilities to transverse hyperspace, right? With Ahsoka in their mouth, Huang in their mouth, but leaving Hera Syndulla behind, which I feel is a mistake. I'm really wishing Hera had more of a chance to shine in the series so far, but she's sort of been relegated to a general mired in red tape. Yes, she acted on her own. She's going to get in trouble for it, but I wish she was more defiant earlier on and was the one going with them, right? I wish the entire Rebels crew was reunited. I still don't understand why Zeb's not here. Callus would have been great too. There was an opportunity for all these things to happen, and I'm a little surprised that it hasn't happened in that fashion. But I mean, the show is titled Ahsoka, so there you go. That might be the answer to our questions right there. But it's a lot. It's a big episode. A lot of things happen. And again, I get it. The show's named Ahsoka, but I'm a little bummed we didn't get any time with Baylan or Shin Hati. We still haven't seen Thrawn yet. No hints of Ezra Bridger. And we're at episode 5. There's 3 left. So I'm sort of chomping at the bit here to get some Thrawn action in my life, and it just hasn't come to be just yet. And that is sort of bumming me out a little bit, because I need it. I want it. I want that throne action in my life. And yeah, it would just sort of bum me out if we don't get to start seeing the bad guys being bad guys here pretty soon. Again, the character development and the emotional journey that Ahsoka's on right now is awesome and interesting. I just wish we were balancing it out a little bit more with, the things that I want from the bad guys. Like, I want to know more about Baylan Skoll and Shin Hati. I want to know what's their deal. Why can't I figure out their deal? Why won't anyone tell me what their deal is? There's a lot to get into in the show for 3 more episodes. So I hope we give the bad guys a little bit more focus, because I would really like to understand them better and their motives for doing what they're doing. But that's just my wish list. This episode is totally awesome. It's 9.5 buckets right off the jump. And I can't wait to watch it again tonight. It's going to be a super rad good time because I really dig it. It's a lot of fun. And again, there's a lot of layers and complexity. There's a lot of things you can pull out from that conversation that Ahsoka and Anakin are having with each other. There's a lot of good things in there. And I look forward to watching it again and maybe seeing 1 or 2 more things, and we'll bring them up on next week's podcast. So yeah, 9.5 buckets. Great episode, everybody. I want more from the show. I don't know how much more I can get. Maybe my expectations are just too gosh darn high, but I'm loving what we're getting, and it's 9.5 buckets, and I'm so happy with this episode personally. Cannot wait. And I think that's all my main talking points here. We did it, folks. We hit on all the big ones, and I got through it in a fairly succinct manner without too much rambling and running around. So, hey, let's wrap this show up, all right? Thank you, Buckethead Nation. You are the best. You are my favorite Star Wars fans, and I'm so glad you guys stick around every week to listen to me talk on this show. I don't want there may be some things coming up for the show down the road. I don't want to talk about them just yet. They're in the very early planning stages. But I'm so glad you're here. Stay tuned. I think there are going to be some big, fun things coming up, and I'll keep you all posted on them as soon as I'm ready to talk about them more. But know that I'm always looking for ways to improve the show. So thank you for sticking around and being awesome. Nargai Tom. Oh my gosh. Sorry, Nargai Tom, and this is the Mando Vision podcast. Thank you again for checking out and supporting all the small independent Star Wars podcasts that are out there. I think I speak for all of us when I say that everybody who takes the time to download and listen to our shows, we truly, truly appreciate you all. And again, the members of Buckethead Nation are my personal favorites because you're checking out this show, and that means the world to me. Hit us up on social media. We're at Mando_Vision on Twitter/X and Instagram. You can email the show at mandovisiontom@gmail.com. Make sure to like, subscribe, follow, and share the show with all the Mandalorians in your covert. And another great way to support the podcast, if possible or so inclined, is to give us sweet, sweet, sweet 5-star reviews, if that is something that your podcast listening format allows you to do. They really do help the small independent podcasts like us stand out and not get lost in the shuffle of all those big mass-produced corporate podcasts that are out there stomping all over us with their ads and their revenue-generating stuff. We don't do that anymore. We couldn't hack it. Anyways, my friends, thank you. Continue to be great Star Wars fans. Continue to bring people to this show. It seems like new audience members are liking the show a lot. This might be a good entry point for them for Star Wars. It's a great character, and it's someone that I think people are able to connect with really, really well. And it's full of nice performances, too. And I can't wait to see what this new, lighter Ahsoka brings to the table next week in Part 6. So, yeah, that's that. Let's get out of here, my friends. We'll be back next week. We'll be more on time next week. There shouldn't be any hiccups in the production schedule. So that would mean a show out by midday on Wednesday, much earlier than today's will be out. But hey, we're going to do our best, okay? All right. All right, remember, Bucketheads, this podcast can only end one way. This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way. This is the way.
Hey, I have an idea. Huyang, why don't you show Jason inside your starship?
I've been in a starship before.
A Jedi starship?
Come along. I'll show you the training room.
You have a training room in your starship? Will you train me?
No.
Do you know how to build a lightsaber?
Yes?
Will you teach me?
No.